All right, for more on the story, let's now cross live to Paris, and we are joined by Thami Dickson, who has been on the story at COP21. Well, Thami, bonjour to you. How have the negotiations been going so far?
Well, good afternoon, Colin. The negotiations here are very, very tough. There's no joke about that. As I speak to you now, the technical teams are still doing quite an extensive lobbying. There's a lot of deal making that is happening now. Remember that there's a draft agreement that is on the table, but that still needs to be worked on to produce a second draft that will then go to the final agreement. That's the space where they are in now. It's highly bracketed, which means there are a lot of controversial issues that they still need to tackle. And there's also a wording that they need to fix. And so you have now legal teams looking at the draft and looking at the implications of each word and the text that is on that draft. It's a very technical point now where they act to make sure that they have the agreement. But we've got big issues that they're still battling with, and it doesn't look possible, at least from our point of view, that really they'll be able to do that by the end of tomorrow, which is the deadline that they've set themselves to actually produce the second draft, so that they can now, the ministers can now come together at a high level segment to really push it towards being a final agreement. So really the emotions are high here, tensions, you could see them, the different groups representing different interests. I mean, you've got Africa group, it's got its own interest, you've got the European countries, you've got island states, you've got coastal countries, all of them, you've got churches, they are here, all of them, and non-governmental organizations, all of them, they bring different interests, and they're putting different demands on the table, that all of those have to go into the final agreement. So it's a very tough job that they are engaged in. Colin.
Yeah, I heard you in your earlier report saying that failure to reach a deal by the end of this week will be too ghastly to contemplate. And I just wondered to myself, has anyone raised the issue regarding violations regarding the emission legislation, especially with reference to the VW emission saga and, this sporadic violation, and other big countries who were at first reluctant to sign to the emissions deal that can be reached globally?
Well, that's actually one of the key controversial issues that is being discussed here. The issue of how do you monitor countries, because what has happened before they came here, each country, all the countries that are members of the United Nations, they have presented their own set of commitments by which they will be reducing gas emissions. So they made those commitments. Now, the issue now that is on the table here is how do you then make sure that you monitor those individual countries to be able to deliver on the promises and the commitments that they have made. That's the issue, and it's very, very critical. It then leads you to another issue, which is about the status of the agreement that they have to come up with. Is whether the agreement has to be legally binding to make sure that it has a legal force to ensure that whatever commitments that they're going to make here in terms of reducing gas emissions, those commitments will have a legal force. They will be forcibly implemented, and there will be consequences for anybody and any company who go beyond those commitments. That's the key issue. The other group says no, these commitments are voluntary. And nobody should be punished if they fail to live up to the very commitments that they failed. So that is a very technical issue. It's actually very controversial because you have to pull these groups towards the middle to be able to agree as to whether the agreement that will come out of this will be legally binding or whether it will be a voluntary agreement that will guide countries in terms of how they deal with gas emissions. Colin?
Right, surely there's lots to expect, and we'll keep monitoring the situation, and we'll cross live to you as and when the story develops. All I can say now is merci beaucoup, Thami Dickson.
Merci beaucoup, Colin. Merci beaucoup.